morning, everybody. Thank you so much for attending our proposed rulemaking kickoff meeting today. I'm going to give people just another minute or so to join the call here, and we'll be starting in just a moment. Alrighty, well, it's 9:02 and people joining is kind of leveled off here, so I will go ahead and get started. So again, good morning. My name is Caitlin Burwell, and I am a project manager here in the Watershed Improvement Unit, and I am the project manager for this proposed rulemaking. Also on the call today, we've got a few panelists. First, I'll start with Natalie Mullenberg. She is the supervisor of the Watershed Improvement Unit here in the Waste Programs Division, or Water Quality Division, excuse me. We also have Erin Jordan, who is the Surface Water Quality Section Manager. We've got Josie Maressa. She is our Deputy Director for the Water Quality Division. Trevor Bajor, who is the Director of the Water Quality Division. We've got Krista Osterberg, who is our Legislative Liaison. And finally, Jonathan Quincy, who is a rule writer here in Water as well. So I will turn it over to Trevor for a few opening remarks.
Good morning, everybody. Just wanted to say welcome and thank you for joining us. You know, we've had a statute in our laws that says ADEQ shall create a program to control non-point source discharges, right? So discharges from sites that are not, don't have a pipe necessarily. And so we're excited to say that even though it's been several years since we've had this obligation, that we're finally there and we're ready to start putting a system together. Caitlin and the team will get into all the details. We think this is a fairly easy rulemaking, a fairly straightforward change that we're proposing. So we're excited to get your thoughts and your feedback on it. But really, it's just us trying to comply with the requirements that the legislature and leadership has put onto us. So thank you for being here. At the end of Caitlin's presentation, there'll be question and answers. And so I know the whole team will be here ready to answer any questions that you have. So let's get going, Caitlin. It's all yours.
All right, fantastic. Thank you again, Trevor. All right. So again, I want to thank you all for taking the time to attend this meeting today to learn more about the proposed rules for the remediation of abandoned hard rock mines that are impacting or threatening our state's surface waters. And so throughout the presentation, you'll hear me use a few acronyms. So the first of those is AML, which stands for Abandoned Mine Lands. The second is NPS, and this stands for non-point source. All right, so just a few housekeeping items as we get started here. We're going to ask that you put all of your questions into the Q&A tool as they come to you, and then we will go through those questions during the Q&A session at the end of this meeting. This really helps us document all the questions that have been asked and then provide any follow-up answers to questions that we're unable to answer during this call. And that question button is located in the upper right corner of your screen. So you should see that there. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started here. All right, so here is our agenda for today. And this, we're going to start with a little bit of background on this issue, including what non-point source pollution is, and more specifically, how non-point source pollution discharges from AMLs in Arizona are leading to surface water quality issues. We'll also discuss what program and grant funding enable cleanups of these AMLs. We'll then move into why ADEQ is proposing these rules. Then I'll provide an overview of what the rules will include, what they'll exclude, and then the impact that ADEQ expects the rules to have on all of you, our stakeholders. And so then we'll review a few completed projects that have resulted in some really great successes and improvements in our water quality around the state. And then I will wrap up the presentation by discussing our project schedule and key milestones for the rulemaking. All right, so some background on non-point source pollution. Non-point source pollution occurs when rainfall or snowmelt move over and through the ground, taking with it pollutants which ultimately end up in surface waters and groundwaters. And they typically discharge indirectly into waterways. And unlike point sources, non-point sources come from many different types of sources or activities rather than a single source. And so some examples of non-point sources include drainage from abandoned mine lands, excess fertilizers, pesticides, or herbicides from agricultural lands and residential areas, sediment from forest lands impacted by wildfires or stream banks that are eroding, bacteria and nutrients from livestock, from pet waste or faulty septic systems, and then also atmospheric deposition. And that list is by no means exhaustive, but point sources, on the other hand, are discrete conveyances from things like pipes or channels or wells where the pollutants are being directly discharged into waterways. And so some facilities that you may associate with point sources are wastewater treatment facilities or active mines, which are all regulated under permits that protect the water body that's receiving that discharge. And so according to EPA, states year after year continue to report that non-point source pollution is the leading remaining cause of water quality problems in the country. And kind of is supporting that statistic is an internal analysis that ADEQ did in 2023, where we analyzed all of the load contributions that are coming from point and non-point source discharges based on our existing total maximum daily load reports, or our TMDL reports. And what that analysis found is that 96% of Arizona's surface water impairments are attributable to non-point source pollution. So both nationally and in Arizona, regulators are doing a pretty good job or adequately controlling point sources, but we definitely have some work to do with respect to non-point source pollution. And so one reason for this statistic might be that non-point sources are largely unregulated, and that is both here in Arizona and at the national level. So this means that any measures that we're taking to control non-point source pollution have to be voluntary and really rely on those partnerships and on grant funding. All right, so as I mentioned, abandoned mine lands are just one type of non-point source pollution. But why is ADEQ deciding to focus the proposed rules on this one particular source? Arizona's 2024 Clean Water Act assessment reported that we have 182 waters and 290 parameters that are impaired throughout the state. And by parameters, I mean the various metals, your arsenic, copper, lead, et cetera, E. coli, suspended sediment, et cetera. Those are all of our parameters that we sample for and monitor. And collectively, metals are the primary cause of surface water impairment in the state, which is likely attributable to abandoned mine lands. And so actually 54% of all of Arizona's impairments are for metals. And then 4 out of 5 of our TMDLs currently in development work to address metals. And the United States Geological Survey databases indicate that there are more than 44,000 AMLs in Arizona. However, ADEQ expects that number to go up quite a bit as we conduct field verification and continue that process. Other states have actually found that for each of those USGS points on the map, there can be as many as 3 to a dozen or more features in the area of that one point. So definitely a lot more mines for us to identify and to work on here. All right, so I want to make sure that the scope of the rules is clear from the beginning here. And I want to take a moment to discuss kind of the differences between our active mines and what an abandoned mine is. An active mine, as the name suggests, is where mining activities are ongoing. The discharges from, excuse me, active mines are classified as point sources and are therefore regulated by multiple laws. Active mines have responsible parties that are responsible for developing restoration plans for when those mining activities cease, for maintaining financial assurance mechanisms. On the other hand, abandoned mines are sites where mining activities permanently ceased. Many of these AMLs predate any kind of modern environmental laws, and really there is no responsible party at this time for those sites. They're truly orphaned or abandoned. Abandoned mine lands are typically located on private property, state and federal lands, or quite often a combination of those types of ownerships. And AMLs are typically classified as non-point sources, and again are largely unregulated. And so the proposed rules focus on abandoned mine lands only. They will have nothing to do with any kind of active mining. So just some background on the Clean Water Act, Section 319, which is our primary funding mechanism for these projects. As I mentioned, these projects are typically implemented using grant funds that are administered by US EPA. And so Section 319 was established by the 1987 amendments to the Clean Water Act and really created a national program to control non-point sources of water pollution. And so every year, states, territories, and tribes receive money from EPA to implement their EPA-approved non-point source management programs. And so those funds can be used to support activities for things such as technical and financial assistance, education and training, demonstration projects, and then monitoring to assess the success of our implementation projects that we've already put in place. So why is ADEQ proposing these new rules? There are two primary reasons that we are proposing these. The first is that although ADEQ has reduced the number of impaired waters since it started remediating abandoned mine lands in 2020, there are still many more AMLs that are impacting our surface waters that need to be addressed. So the rules are going to establish an effective, standardized remediation process for addressing those AMLs. The second reason is that ADEQ is required by statute to establish a state-level non-point source program through rulemaking to control non-point source discharges into waters of the US, or WOTUS. So considering that metals are Arizona's top cause of surface water impairment, it makes sense for us to focus the rules on AMLs. So what the rules are going to do is create a new article. It's going to be Article 11, and this will be added to the Arizona Administrative Code under Title 18, Chapter 9, which is the Water Pollution Control chapter. So that is where the rules will be located. So kind of to the meat of all of this, this is kind of explaining how the rules are going to apply and what they'll do. So the overall outcome that we are looking to achieve with this rulemaking is to establish that standardized process for identifying, investigating, and remediating non-point source discharges from abandoned hard rock mines that are impacting or threatening to impact our surface waters throughout Arizona. And so in order for the rules to apply, there are three specific elements that have to be met. The first element is that the discharge that's being remediated must be from an abandoned hard rock mine. Again, we're not looking at active mining, we're not looking at mines other than hard rock mines. The second is that the discharge must be non-point source in nature and must not be regulated under another Title 49 program. That includes programs such as hazardous waste or WARF or the voluntary remediation program. So again, truly abandoned, not being addressed by any other kind of remediation program. And then finally, the person that is remediating the discharge must be using ADEQ funds or non-point source funds that are managed or administered by ADEQ. And that would be something such as the Clean Water Act Section 319 funds, which ADEQ has the ability to sub-award those funds. And so if all three of those elements are met, the rules apply, and the person then must remediate the site using the process that will be set out in the rule. So just a quick recap, the rules will only apply to the remediation of non-point source discharges from abandoned hard rock mines that are using ADEQ or ADEQ administered funds and that are not being addressed under another Title 49 program. And so, as Trevor kind of mentioned in the beginning, these rules are really not introducing anything new. They are simply codifying a standardized process that ADEQ has already been implementing and doing, but will keep ADEQ accountable, or anyone that is using these funds for this purpose accountable when remediating abandoned mine lands and improving overall transparency for this process. So just a little bit more about the rules. As I mentioned already, they are not introducing any new fees. All this remediation is being covered using a combination of state, federal, or private monies. Most of these projects are funded through that Section 319 Clean Water Act funding. And then I also want to reiterate that the rules will not apply to any other type of discharge or source. Again, just abandoned hard rock mines, which are considered non-point sources. So the impact of the rules, how is this going to affect our stakeholders and Arizona citizens? We are not expecting that the rules are going to impose any additional burden on our stakeholders. And we say this for several reasons. The first is that these projects, again, are being funded by that Section 319 Clean Water Act funding and other grants that become available. There are no fees associated with these rules, and they're not seeking to change any existing fees. The rules have a very specific focus, and again, we're looking at a very, very specific remediation kind of project. And if you are not already involved in these projects, the chances are that moving forward, you will not be, and these rules will not really have an impact on you. And so we actually expect that the rules will have a positive impact on Arizona citizens. The rules are ensuring that we have that standardized process in place for remediating AMLs given this particular set of conditions. And it ensures that projects are all being held to the same standards and are completed in a similar manner. And as we've already seen, implementation of these projects results in improved surface water quality throughout the state. And so I'll be highlighting a few of those successes here next. All right, so our first example is Hillside Mine. This site was remediated in 2019. It's located in Yavapai County, just north of Baghdad. The partners here included private landowners, the Arizona State Land Department, and BLM. And at the end of the project, we were able to reduce the metal loadings into Boulder Creek and delist Boulder Creek for beryllium, copper, manganese, and pH. We are still working on getting those zinc and arsenic impairments removed as well. And I just want to say this, and this applies for all of the projects that I'll talk about here in the next few minutes. It can take some time to really see the full effect or outcome of these projects. And so we have a really good process or system in place that allows us to continue to monitor these water bodies and these sites and perform any kind of enhancements that we need to ensure that the best outcomes possible are achieved. So it may just take some time for us to really see those full improvements. The next example is 3R Mine that was remediated in 2021. This is in Santa Cruz County outside of Patagonia. The partners, again, were private landowners and the U.S. Forest Service. We were able to reduce the metal loadings into 3R tributary, which ultimately ends up in Sonoyta Creek and Patagonia Lake. And so we were able to delist 3R tributary for beryllium, cadmium, and zinc. However, it's still impaired for copper, nickel, and pH. But we're waiting to kind of see what comes of that as time goes by. The final example is Gibson Mine. This was one of 6 abandoned mines that was identified in 2001 as contributing copper impairments to Pinto Creek. And so 5 of the sites were located on U.S. Forest Service land, 1 was on privately owned land. Gibson Mine, though, we were able to work with U.S. Forest Service, private landowners to remediate these sites. And we were able to remove 100,000 tons of mine impacted soils. We consolidated over 8,000 cubic yards of waste rock into these consolidation cells, closed 10 adits, 12 shafts, and then revegetated over 6 acres using a U.S. Forest Service approved seed mix. And so as of November of 2023, the surface water samples in Pinto Creek are meeting water quality standards for copper. So definitely a major success here. All right. And so finally to our schedule and key milestones. This summer of this year, we received our exemption memo and had that approved by the governor's office. We then proceeded with filing our notice of docket opening. That was last month. So we are now kind of in this fall column here. We are holding this kickoff meeting. We are engaging in tribal consultation and have started the process of drafting the rule language. This winter, we'll be holding an additional stakeholder meeting. We will continue tribal consultation, and we will also be filing the notice of proposed rulemaking. Come next spring, we will be holding a 30-day public comment period for the notice of proposed rulemaking and also a public hearing on that notice of proposed rulemaking. Next summer, we will submit the notice of final rulemaking to the Governor's Regulatory Review Council, or GRC. GRC will hold their study session and have a meeting to decide if those rules can proceed. If they are, we will file the notice of final rulemaking with the Secretary of State, and then those rules will become effective in the fall of 2026. All right. So if you have any questions after this meeting, please feel free to reach out to myself or Natalie Mullenberg. And then at this time, though, we'll go ahead and move into the Q&A portion of the meeting. And I would like to thank you all again for attending today. So thank you.